Hey everyone, Jason Sherman here with Strap On Your Boots. In today's episode, I have with me an entrepreneur and author, Arnaud Henville-Wedholm. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm super excited to be with you
Yeah,
and
and
your listeners. Yeah.
and we're definitely going to be having some fun today in a potentially negative way because we're talking about how to seek and embrace failure in your startup. And, you know, in a world where everyone is constantly being pushed in the news and media for their successes, we don't really see what happens behind the scenes, what kind of failures they had leading up to those successes. So we're going to obviously talk about a startup that you also ran. Tell me a little bit about the social network that you kind of built to try to combat the big evil Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we aimed at doing. I mean, displacing Facebook by coming up with a social network that would be more engaging in that sense of actually having people do things in the real world as opposed to just, pressing a like button from their sofa. And so the whole idea was to engage them via a mechanics of challenge. So we would challenge people to do X, Y, Z, start running if they want to run or whatever, grow a beard or learn Chinese or whatnot. And the idea was really to bring back people into doing something that they, intimately wanted to do and become the best versions of themselves. So that was the idea.
So it sounds kind of like a little bit like meetup.com, where you would find people that were like you that wanted to do the same things you wanted to do. And it was more activity based, challenge based, kind of basically helping each other be better person. Whereas Facebook, it's all about your ego and showing off your life. And in a lot of ways, there's a lot of misinformation and bad news going around. So did you guys have some sort of learning curve when it came to figuring out what your target audience was looking for out of a social network?
Yeah, so that was quite a journey in itself. I mean, we came back from. I mean, we came from a behavioral background, so we were doing change management, like helping large organizations to change internally, typically cascading large, strategic initiatives. So we would have in our work prior to launching the social network, we would have to help employees, develop the skills and also the behaviors to help the strategy being implemented. And so the assumption was that everybody wants to be a better themselves. Well, in theory they do, but when it comes to practicing it, when it comes to implementing it, it's very hard to move from point A to point B. And you see that every 1st of January, everyone signs up for the gym, and then after the
Right.
mid-March, no one goes anymore. Exactly.
Everyone falls off the proverbial New Year's resolution cliff of death. So you were doing B2C, business to consumer, which means you were trying to help organizations and their employees. And you ran this for 6 years. You pivoted a couple of times. And during this journey, when did you finally realize that you had, quote unquote, failed? When did you embrace that failure, and how did you seek that failure out to kind of move on to the next step?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I mean, it takes a lot of time. There's this one liner, like you have to fail fast, fail forward, and so on. I've learned that actually you don't want to fail fast. You want to fail slow. You want to really tweak the thing in all possible direction to make sure that at the end of it, you've really tried everything you could do to make that work. And then when you do that, then you have nothing to be feeling bad about. So we ran that the whole thing. We raised the money. I mean, we did the typical startup journey, several rounds, etc. But eventually, after 6.5 years, we realized that, well, yeah, this is not working. We've tried everything. We got the team and so forth, but this is not working. It's time to give up. So there's very much like Tony Robbins, who says like, well, if you had tried everything, you would be rich, you would be profitable. Right. Which is the case. I mean, if you had tried everything, you can always do some more. You can always like lower your expenses, move to a smaller apartment. You can't dump your kids though. So I mean, the limitation is based on everything that is around you and not necessarily just your own motivation and your own grit and vision. So anyway, long story short, we said, well, that's enough. We've tried everything. Let's move on.
Right. So you found the failure. You supposedly embraced it. Take me through, for entrepreneurs that are listening to this, or if they're watching, what it takes to embrace failure, what it takes to seek failure, because most people are not. They're seeking out success. They're trying to figure out how to make this thing work, how they can be profitable, how they can get customers, how they can get traction and revenue. That's what they're seeking. They're not seeking failure. So how do you do that? How do you change your mindset to try to break your process, break your business, and fail fast? Like, what do you do? How do you do that?
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one, because obviously when you launch your thing, you're driven, you have this goal that you want to achieve, and so yeah, that's what you pursue. Turns out that, from the moment you're born, pretty much, you are experimenting. I mean, basically anything you do is trying, and when you start walking, you fall, and then you get up again, and you fall again, and you've got the forehead that is totally bruised, and that's okay. You keep going. Whereas somehow, the moment you raise money, you kind of slave to that money that you've raised, and you found yourself hesitant to maybe run some experiment or try things that you haven't done, or that are, seems unconventional, and slowly but surely you play safe. So I've found that, having done the whole journey, that it's much better to keep experimenting, and convince your shareholders that, well, this is where we come from, and we have no blueprint. I mean, as a startup, you have nothing to go on until you get traction. So until you get actual traction and confirmation from the market that what you're doing is actually gaining speed, well, you haven't got much. So just go out there, try different things, and as I said, fail slow until hopefully you get the traction that you deserve.
Yeah, and essentially it sounds like you're saying a lot of the things that I've mentioned in my podcast, my book, my course, where it's mitigate the risk for the investors by trying as many things as you can, and, again, failing as many times as you can to find that one thing that does work, so that you can now start throwing the money onto that and saying, look, we made this work. Now your risk is lowered tremendously, because we've already figured out what doesn't work 17 times, and the 18th time it worked. So it sounds like you're almost telling people to continue to do small iterations and, pivots, whatever they have to do to figure out what does not work, so they can find the one thing that does work. Now, right. How do you, without giving me the obvious answer as like, oh, well, you made revenue or you earned traction, how do you figure out, because these are entrepreneurs that are listening right now, they might not understand how to succeed, because you're talking about raising several rounds of funding. Most entrepreneurs, as you might know, never raise even one round of funding. So we're talking about entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out how they found that thing that worked. How do you figure out the thing that worked? When do you realize it?
Yeah, that's really tricky, and that I cover in the book. There's this thing I call the illusion of traction. On paper, it looks like you have a few dots, and it may look like a start of a trend, but it's not. It's just a few dots, and so it's very easy to be blinded by this and believe that you're having traction and throwing yourself into this, up until you realize, like, oops, didn't work. It wasn't the thing. So as long as you keep your head, clear, and you are conscious of this, I think you set yourself for higher success. Not believing too early that this thing that you are potentially seeing is actually the thing. So keeping an open mind on what could be happening, because it's so easy to be believing that, yeah, this is it. And we've seen it so many times, and I guess every entrepreneur sees it. So yeah, I cover all of that in my book. How hard can it be?
How hard can it be, for sure, man? And it's one thing to say that you succeeded in your startup, but it's a tough thing to say, especially after 6 years, that you failed in your startup. So how do you embrace that? What's the next step after you, quote unquote, fail? Like, how do you move on?
Yeah. So, as we failed, and again, we failed to live up to the expectations that we had set to ourselves. So as you mentioned, we did raise money, we did land some massive customers, we did amazing things. So on paper, you could still argue that this is some sort of a success. We did sell the platform and so forth. We didn't make zillions, so in that sense, we failed. But looking back, I was wondering, where did it go wrong? What happened? Why did I not become the next Zuckerberg? And I started looking at the content that we have out there, and the books that we are shown, and realized that, hey, it's just all about success. So basically, this image that we're given, or the stuff that we are being sold to, is this image of, if you try a little bit, if you work this side hustle from 6 to 7, maybe, no, potentially you'll be a zillionaire if you buy this guide and if you come to the course. And so I thought that this is off. We need to give people, entrepreneurs who want to try, or who are struggling as we speak, wondering whether they're actually getting traction, like the real view of what it is. Like literally strap on your boots and sit with me for a little while and understand what it means to be an entrepreneur. And so I decided, in spite of having failed, to really be truthful and really honest about the journey itself, what it means, how you get to struggle for so many years, and yet perhaps it doesn't even pan out, and perhaps that's okay. At the end of the day, we all know this very nice sentence that it's never about the destination and the prize and the medal and the money. It's really about the journey and who you become as you experience life. So I've become really a firm believer of, maybe it wasn't my turn to dent the universe. Maybe it's okay. Let's move on and do something else.
So true, man. And, I would love to see all the gurus out there pushing their books and their courses on how to succeed as a side hustle, if they could give truth and honesty in their stuff, because they do not. And as you know, most of them are saying you can be a zillionaire too if you just do these things, but they're not replicable, right? They're not replicable. You can't duplicate what they do. And that's the sad truth. Unfortunately, people get kind of swindled, right? So you're telling the truth of your story. I'm telling the truth of my story, my book. And that's really what people need to hear, is that even if you don't succeed, try again, right? It's another saying, right? And you learned a lot. You learned a lot from your experience, that you raised money, right? You had these customers, you had traction. You may not have sold for billions of dollars, but you did succeed. Right. So it's looked at as a failure from a lot of people because you're not the next Mark Zuckerberg. But, I'd say kudos to that. I'd say that, you learned from your mistakes. Now, if you go into your next startup, if you decide to go into another startup, you have so much experience. So how do you curate and take that experience and package it in a way that your next idea, and this is for any entrepreneur out there, is a much higher chance of success? Like, what's the strategy there?
Yeah, so I've deployed the strategy actually. So today I haven't started a new startup. I'm actually employed in a startup, but I think authenticity has been the key. I went to the interview saying that, hey, I've failed and this is what I've learned, and that's why I got the job, because I had so much to show for, and I came with real authenticity of what has happened, and as a result I got a lot of trust up front, and could demonstrate that, yeah, I know, I walk the walk and talk the talk. So I think that's the key, being genuine with yourself, being honest, and going in with disclosing everything, because, and again, you feel better about it, and it's much better for everybody. So that would be for me the embracing it. I mean, really disclosing it.
I love it, man. So being honest, truthful with yourself, finding out who you are along the journey, and being authentic to people around you is the way to go. I love it, man. Arnaud, thanks so much. Where can people find out more about your book and more about what you do?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jason. So the book you can grab anywhere and everywhere, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, really any platform out there, even Walmart. It's called How Hard Can It Be? And it's there's a subtitle, Startup Lessons from Trying and Failing to Take Down Facebook. The cover is a beautiful all tech entrepreneurs, they're all about the unicorn. So mine has a broken horn, and it's a broken unicorn. And I want people to understand that we are all broken unicorns until we're not. So thanks, Jason.
This was great, man. Thanks again. Appreciate it. And hope everyone enjoyed this episode. And as always, we will see you in next week's episode.